We're leaving tomorrow, Mom. I sold your beach house and Dad's Rolex, but the real truth is about something much deeper. Jamie's voice echoed in the dim light of the cramped living room as she looked over at her mother, Ruth, whose vacant eyes stared blankly ahead. The walls closed in on her, heavy with memories that tugged at her heart yet made her bones ache with pressure. Jamie felt a swell of guilt not just for the things she had done, but for the things she still had yet to face. The attic was cluttered with remnants of her past, faded photographs and long-forgotten toys, a ghostly reminder of what life used to be. She rummaged through it, feeling the dust dance in the light like whispers of forgotten dreams. What am I doing? She muttered to herself, the weight of financial struggles bearing down on her. What did it mean to sell off everything? The beach house had been a haven. And Dad's Rolex, a token of a life filled with promise. Yet, every asset felt burdensome now. As her fingers brushed against the edges of a weathered box, a thrill of anticipation mixed with dread surged through her. Letters, buried in layers of dust, sprinkled with the aroma of past. What secrets did her father hold within those pages? Jamie's heart raced, torn between the desire to honor him and the reality of the potential mockery from the townsfolk, who always seemed to know too much and too little at the same time. She hesitated. Could she even lift the weight of a legacy that felt so distant yet so demanding? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted one letter to the light. There it was, his hope for a community center, a piece of him that had never been realized. How could she betray him after all this? But how could she not? The community had its own demands, expectations that layered over her like a heavy wool blanket she was shoved beneath. And as she looked back over her shoulder, she could sense the stares of neighbors just outside their window, those prying eyes that weighed on her like shame itself. Tomorrow would begin her life anew, but the thought of facing that town meeting ultimately fortified her turmoil. She had no choice but to confront the council and demand proper funding. Could she push forward in a community that had left her father's dream to rot? Would they dismiss her, just as they'd dismissed him? Sweat trickled down her spine, and she felt the overwhelming urge to run. But what would running change? The dreams, the hopes, the undeniable weight of legacy pulsed with every heartbeat. She would have to be the voice for the embers that once flickered brightly in her father's heart, or watch them die. Tomorrow loomed ahead, filled with uncertainty, but it was now or never. The room held its breath, suffocated beneath the pressure of unspoken truths. Could she find the resolve to bridge her anguish into a legacy, or would the memories remain shackled to disappointment? Jamie stood in the suffocating silence of the attic, the weight of her father's letters pulling her deeper into the past. The dust around her floated like ghosts, each particle whispering what could have been. Underneath the surface was a fierce need to honor her father's aspirations, but also a growing awareness that time was running out. Their life had spiraled into chaos. Selling off remnants of their past felt like a betrayal and a necessity all at once. As she sifted through the fragile papers, one phrase danced around her mind like a blade: responsibilities. She was locked in a battle between honoring the memory of her father and securing her own future. With each letter opened, she swayed between nostalgia and the sudden bite of anxiety. What if the townspeople's skepticism faded from mere whispers to real accusations? Every choice weighs heavier than the last, Jamie whispered, her voice cutting through the stillness. She fought hard against the overwhelming urge to simply close the box, to fall back into the comforting illusion that tomorrow would magically resolve itself. It was a familiar temptation. Confrontation always felt like staring down a dark tunnel with no light. Yet, somewhere within lay a flicker of resolve, a determination to dismantle the fear shackling her to inaction. A bold idea sparked in her mind. Perhaps the town meeting wasn't merely an opportunity to confront the council but also a chance to reclaim her father's vision. What if she wasn't just a daughter fulfilling a legacy, but a woman making her mark. A wave of adrenaline surged through her, nudging the lingering shadows of doubt aside. Motivation craved a plan, one not solely dependent on the acceptance of the townsfolk but grounded in her own ambition. The thought took shape like smoke swirling into form. She would present her father's vision, but on her terms. No apologies, no caveats. Jamie envisioned a slideshow that entwined her father's passion with her newfound strength. Through his hope, she could carve out space for her own voice. She could become the embodiment of that legacy, a powerful reflection of the dreams they both held dear. Determination replaced hesitation as Jamie searched for her laptop. The soft glow of the screen illuminated her surroundings. She was ready to channel her father's dreams into something more relevant, something resonant. The possibilities flickered before her like a lighthouse beacon. Hours melted away in the warm cocoon of creation, and while she worked, Jamie felt a spark of control, something completely foreign. With every slide, she peeled back layers of doubt that had long suffocated her. But in the midst of this newfound momentum, a hollow reminder pricked her heart: the impending confrontation. The townspeople had always looked at her through the lens of her father's failures. How would she drive past their judgment? The thoughts sucked her resolve, weaving fear back into her veins. Morning light crept through the attic window, a silent herald of the day to come. With the presentation ready, she glanced at her reflection in a nearby dusty mirror. Jamie barely recognized the face staring back. The girl who had feared disappointment now grappled with rising confidence. Incredibly, she felt a connection to her father's spirit running through her veins, a reminder that every great accomplishment began with stepping into the unknown. The meeting was only hours away, and as Jamie gathered her materials, she recognized a truth: this was more than just a proposal, it was a reclamation of her own identity. The stepping stones towards realizing her true self lay ahead, each one marked by faint doubt but now fortified by the promise of her father's unfinished dreams. The moment had arrived to seize her narrative. An image of her father standing proud flooded her mind. The time had come to face the council and, more importantly, to face herself. Jamie took a deep breath, steeling her heart for what lay ahead. If she faltered now, the years of silent torment might slip back into the shadows. Her resolve hardened. Today wasn't just about finishing her father's work, it was about standing tall in a world that had often tried to keep her small. As she locked the attic door behind her, a thought stirred in her mind: would she accept their judgment or fight to redefine her identity? Now, with her destiny poised for discovery, each heartbeat reverberated with the anxious thrill of beginning anew. The determination to step into the light had ignited a fire within, but as she turned to leave, another thought loomed large: would her voice be strong enough to rise above the echoes of doubt? Jamie hurried down the narrow stairs, each step resonating with the urgency clenching her chest. The attic's solitude fell away as she entered the sunlit kitchen, where artifacts of her childhood lay scattered amongst daily life: old photographs, mismatched mugs, memories frozen in time. She inhaled deeply, the aroma of coffee mingling with the dust of the past, grounding her momentarily in reality. As she moved around the counter, the weight of her presentation drummed in her mind. If she wanted to transform this meeting into more than just a show of her father's dreams, she had to find a way to spin it into a revelation of her own vision. Looking out the window towards the dusty streets, she could almost imagine the familiar faces of the townspeople lined up, skepticism threading through their expressions like an uneasy current. Jamie? Her mother's voice broke through her thoughts, drawing her back. Startled, Jamie turned to find her mother standing in the doorway, a faint frown creasing her brow. "Are you okay? You seem distracted." Just like that, a spark of guilt ignited. Jamie had become so consumed by her own turmoil that she'd nearly forgotten her mother's quiet battles. "Yeah, I'm fine," she replied, but a lingering doubt clung to the back of her mind: was that truly the case? The facade of control often felt precarious, built on a foundation of hidden fears. Her mother advanced, gripping a photo of her father that rested on the table, the corners dog-eared but holding the edges of time. "I miss him, you know. This past year it's been hard." The urge to comfort her mother surged up again, but Jamie wrestled with conflicting emotions. She longed to tell the truth, that she was about to confront a community that had reduced her father's life to mere footnotes of failure. But her own battle felt too consuming, too pivotal to risk speaking it aloud. Instead, she offered a soft smile. I know. I miss him too. Are you really ready for this meeting? Her mother's voice wavered, probing beneath the surface and directly into fears Jamie sought to keep at bay. Ready? Jamie hesitated, rallying her defenses. There was no room for self-doubt now. I will be. I have a plan. The words felt heavier than intended, a shaky resolution crafted on the precipice of uncertainty. Her mother nodded, but Jamie could see the lingering concern in her eyes. Suddenly, it clicked. Her mother wasn't just worried about Jamie facing the council. She worried Jamie would bury herself in her father's shadows rather than rise to her own potential. And that could not be. I'm not just standing up there to recite his dreams, Jamie asserted, feeding the flames of resolve. I'm turning this into my vision. Saying it out loud felt like a seal of commitment. The corners of her mother's lips turned slightly, as if a flicker of pride dared to break through. That sounds like him. You always were a dreamer just like your dad. A wave of warmth flooded Jamie's heart, pushing aside the chilling undertones of doubt. In that moment, she allowed herself to step into her truth. She wasn't just reclaiming her father's dreams. She was building her own path too, interwoven with the remnants of his hope, but uniquely hers. With a renewed sense of purpose igniting her spirit, Jamie poured her coffee and sipped, the warmth coursing through her like fuel. Each sip reinforced the belief that she could navigate this maze of expectations, both internal and external. She could honor her father while simultaneously daring to pursue her own ambitions. The clock ticked closer to the meeting, each second carrying an electrifying charge of anticipation. In that dense air saturated with possibility, Jamie ventured a glance at her mother. We should both be proud today, Mom. The time has come to let go of the past and embrace our futures. Her mother's eyes glimmered with unshed tears, a sign of shared understanding. With that silent exchange, Jamie knew she had to step into her truth not just for herself but for them both. As she grabbed her presentation and headed for the door, a lingering question haunted her. Would the power of her voice withstand the weight of the town's perception? Though fear drifted through her thoughts, Jamie clenched her hands into fists, ready to unveil her vision. Today would be more than just a confrontation, it would be a revelation. What awaited her at the meeting, however, remained shrouded in uncertainty. Would the townspeople celebrate her transformation, or would they desperately cling to the perceptions that had dogged her family's legacy? With a sharp intake of breath, Jamie stepped outside, the sunlight spilling over her like a warm embrace. The vibrant colors of the town buzzed with life, contrasting her pensive mood. A rush of adrenaline shot through her veins as she moved towards the community hall. Each step felt like a descent into her true self, a journey years in the making. As she walked, her mind tumbled over the myriad scenarios that awaited her. The moment she stepped into the meeting, she would be a target for scrutiny, a vessel of her father's legacy embroiled in the townspeople's expectations. The thought was overwhelming, yet somewhere beneath the anxiety, she felt a burgeoning sense of power. This was her chance to redefine her narrative, to dissolve the shadows of her father's past into the light of her own ambitions. Arriving at the entrance, Jamie paused. The double doors loomed before her like the gates to a coliseum. She had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing could prepare her for the cocktail of anticipation and fear swirling within. She inhaled deeply, steadied herself, and pushed through the doors. Inside, the hall buzzed with hushed conversations, a sea of familiar faces turned her way as she entered. Jamie's heart raced, not solely from the weight of their gazes, but from the realization that this was more than a meeting. It was a battlefield, where her father's legacy and her voice would collide. The council table sat elevated in front of her, a row of seasoned members scrutinizing her. Old Mr. Henderson, whose disapproving glare could silence a room, fixed his eyes on Jamie. She could feel the weight of scrutiny press down on her shoulders, a thick fog of judgment threatening to envelop her. Gathering her thoughts, she approached the podium, her presentation trembling in her grasp. She glanced at the projector screen behind her, a collage of images representative of her father's dreams and her own ambitions twisted and intertwined. The space felt electric as her heart found its rhythm, pulsing in sync with her resolve. "Thank you for gathering here today," she started, her voice steady yet soft, a stark contrast to the roaring chaos of her heart. "I stand before you not simply as the daughter of a man whose dreams remained unrealized, but as Jamie, a woman ready to ignite a new vision for our town." A ripple of surprise swept through the audience, seizing their attention. The subtle shifting in their demeanor, from skeptical observers to engaged listeners, propelled Jamie forward. She leaned into her passion, articulating her plans with fervor, intertwining stories of legacy with her own aspirations. "I recognize the shadows my father's past cast over this community. But it's time for those shadows to transform into a guiding light. Together, we can rekindle the dreams of our community, not just to honor my father but to advocate for our collective future." Each word poured out with conviction, dispelling the lingering doubts swirling in her mind. As she spoke, Jamie's earlier fears morphed into something unexpected: empowerment. She began to weave her father's hopes with her own, thanking him for instilling a passion for community while urging the townsfolk to embrace change through innovation. The initial skepticism gave way to curiosity as the room shifted in response to her fervor. But just as momentum surged in her favor, a voice pierced through a familiar baritone that froze the air. It was Paul, a longtime council member and a harsh critic of her father. "Are you ready to face the reality of this town's expectations, Jamie? You're talking about dreams, but we need tangible results. What makes you think you'll succeed where he failed?" The challenge hung heavy in the air, testing the foundation of Jamie's mission. The confrontation pulsed with tension, a direct challenge not just to her plans but to her very identity. Defiance surged within her. "I plan to succeed because I'm not just a reflection of my father's ambitions, I'm the architect of my own vision. I have learned from his mistakes and I will surround myself with those who want to see this place thrive, not merely survive." The fire in her belly flared hotter, igniting the conviction that had taken root just moments before. Yet inherently, Jamie knew the battle had just begun. As she looked out at the sea of faces, some nodded in agreement, others frowned in discontent. The tang of uncertainty clashed with the thrill of agency. The course of her life was shifting, and the stakes were higher than ever. The chapter of her journey had unfolded, only to reveal another layer of complexity. Could she navigate the tempest of resistance and doubt within this fractured legacy? The unresolved tension between past perceptions and her emerging self was only beginning to surface. And as she stood at that podium, a singular thought resonated in her mind: the next moment might not only define her future, but also challenge the very essence of who she was meant to be. What else lay buried beneath the surface, waiting for its time in the spotlight? The silence that followed Paul's barbed question seemed to stretch endlessly. Jamie's pulse throbbed in her ears, each heartbeat echoing the irony of the moment. Here she stood, confronting her father's legacy and battling images of his failures, yet it was an honor to create something meaningful that felt far more urgent than mere defense. "Let us talk about results then, Paul," she countered, her voice now brimming with conviction, tempered by the fire that burned within her. "You want tangible outcomes? We've spent too long clinging to shadows instead. It's time to embrace the light of innovation, accept that the past has shaped us, but it doesn't have to define our future." A murmur circled the hall, a mix of approval and skepticism. The audience had shifted slightly, a delicate balance where honesty and hope intersected. Jamie took a breath, her thoughts shifting as she surveyed the sea of expressions surrounding her. Each face was a delicate tapestry of expectation and doubt, of history and potential. She recalled a time when she had felt small in that same room, her voice unheard, lost in the jumble of her father's influential presence. Today, she was no longer that scared little girl. She was a woman forging her path, ready to dismantle the oppressive weight of her father's reputation. "I know I can't do this alone," she continued, gesturing gracefully to include everyone in her vision. "This town fills me with hope and innovation. Yes, we need results, but we also need collaboration. We need ideas that breathe life with inclusivity, not fear." As the words tumbled out, Jamie realized something else. The echo of her father's dreams didn't just linger in the air like a haunting melody but as a guidepost illuminating a path to her own aspirations. Her voice began to resonate with each personal memory, propelling her forward. With every new sentence, she encountered a different fear, the fear of inadequacy that had shadowed her relentlessly in the past. She was shedding it, layer by layer, transforming doubt into determination. Paul leaned back slightly, the challenger's role he wore shifting to one of reluctant curiosity, but the air still buzzed with tension. She had called for deliverables, yet she understood that the most concrete outcome was not solely measured in profits or numbers, but rather in the spirit she could ignite within the community. I propose we set up workshops, focus on mentorship programs with local businesses and schools that prioritize innovation. Let us build something new, together. An initiative that celebrates regional talents and uplifts our youth. Each proposal felt like reclaiming her narrative, a way to tether her father's legacy into a modern dream. Still, as she outlined her vision, uncertainty gnawed at the edges of her confidence. Each new idea sparked excitement but was rooted in a harrowing reality. What if she invested everything into this initiative only to find the community still cemented in their skepticism? What if they failed again? Suddenly, her chest tightened with the weight of her expectations. If she was the architect of her vision, what if the foundation crumbled beneath her? The thrill of agency twisted into anxiety, a familiar dance that left her momentarily paralyzed. Do you even have the budget for that? Came another voice, this time slicing through the hopeful tapestry she had started to weave. Claire, another long-standing member of the council, squinted from her seat, arms crossed in defiance. I'll find the budget, Claire, she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. I'll knock on doors, seek out grants, collaborate with businesses. I won't stand still waiting for someone to hand us what we need. I believe our community deserves better, and I'm willing to fight for it. With that, a flicker of understanding sparked in a few faces, yet the uncertainty still loomed larger. Jamie could feel the battle of wills simmering, a mixture of acceptance and disbelief dancing on the edge of the outcome. The fire within her flickered but still glowed brightly, kindling. A raw determination that compelled her to stand firm. And just as she gathered her strength in this unpredictable arena, she wondered what else might she need to confront, to truly command not just their attention but their trust. The stakes were mounting, the night was far from over, and the test she feared might lie hidden just around the corner. Ready or not, the time was approaching for her to scale the next precipice of her journey. What awaited her on the other side of this daunting challenge? The atmosphere crackled with tension as Jamie stood there, her heart racing in a mix of anxiety and adrenaline. She had taken a brave step forward, but now the ground felt unsteady, teetering on the brink of transformation or collapse. The murmurs of the crowd were a backdrop, their expressions oscillating between skepticism and cautious interest. Jamie needed to bridge that gap and coax them toward trust. Envisioning her father's legacy felt empowering, yet the reality of reinventing it racked her with uncertainty. What if the ideals she proposed met with the same disdain her father's efforts often encountered? She suppressed the quaking inside, channeling that energy instead into determination. Each person in that room now held power over her aspirations, and acknowledging it only heightened her resolve to inspire their belief. Let us talk specifics, she addressed the council directly, her voice steadying as firm resolve interlaced with purpose. I propose a pilot mentorship program to engage our students with local entrepreneurs. Allow them to see firsthand the paths available to them. This isn't just about me, it's about giving them the tools they think they lack. Paul interjected, his skepticism cloaked with curiosity. And what metrics will you use to prove this initiative is worth the investment? We can't afford another failed endeavor. Jamie paused, feeling the weight of his challenge settle heavily in the room. Instantly, her mind raced, strategizing while simultaneously grappling with her fear of failure. We'll set clear goals, tracked progress, feedback loops. I'll include reports from participants, assess growth through their achievements, and collaborate with education specialists for greater reach. I want to let those metrics outshine the human impact, but we need a clear lens. The council members exchanged glances, some nodding, others remaining steadfastly guarded. It wasn't enough to merely convince them, she needed to ignite a spark in them that connected with her vision. Drawing in a deep breath, she dared to expose her vulnerabilities, shifting the narratives away from the relentless pursuit of financial justification. I stand here with you, grappling with my own doubts about this approach. I've watched my father's reputation falter due to bold dreams that didn't come to fruition, but this is not just a vision for profit. I want to instill hope and strength in our youth. I want them to understand that failure is a lesson, not a stigma. In that moment, Jamie could feel the room shift. Some faces softened, the hard lines of skepticism giving way to intrigue. The trick was to keep that momentum. They needed to see her humanity as much as her ambition. I will seek out partnerships with local businesses willing to invest in our kids, she continued, her voice rising with infectious enthusiasm. This can evolve into a thriving network, showcasing our shared commitment to the next generation. If I can engage just a few influential leaders to support this vision, imagine the rest naturally following suit. As she spoke, Jamie could feel the doubts she carried starting to peel away. She was dialing back the voices telling her to dim her light, instead choosing to let her authenticity shine. With every proposal she laid out, each calculated risk exposed, she felt stronger, more competent, perhaps even more human in their eyes. Yet, a palpable fear lingered, the fear of overpromising and underdelivering. That concern clawed at her insides, reminding her of the disappointing legacy she wanted to escape. But as she glanced around the room, she saw flickers of acceptance, tiny sparks where hope had begun to ignite, and she knew this could be a turning point. Together, we can take back the narrative, she concluded, meeting each gaze with equal parts confidence and vulnerability. I want your trust today, so we can build something lasting together rather than merely restoring what was. As silence enveloped the hall, Jamie wrestled with the charge in the room. Could she rally the very trust she sought? They could either choose to follow her lead, or they could retreat into memories of failure. But just as she thought she saw the tide turning, Claire spoke again, her voice a chill reminder of the past. And what if we give you that trust only to watch you fail? Are you prepared for that possibility? The question hung heavy, and Jamie realized she now faced the greatest test of all, not merely how to gain their trust but whether she could withstand the risk of failure that loomed ahead. This was only the beginning, and with the stakes rising, she was about to learn just how much she was willing to bet on herself. With that revelation, a new kind of determination enveloped her, reminding Jamie that the journey wasn't about perfection but about resilience. What remained to be seen was if she could sustain this level of resolve when the storms of reality came crashing in. As the room settled into an uneasy silence, Jamie felt the weight of Claire's question pressing down on her. The council's faces were a mixture of hope and caution, skepticism and intrigue painting their features as they weighed her words. She could practically hear the gears turning in their minds. Their doubts had shifted from her proposal to her character. It was the first time Jamie had truly grasped the dual nature of this fight. This wasn't merely about reforming her father's legacy, it was also about remaking herself. Failure felt less like an endpoint and more like an essential component of authentic leadership. She'd spent years yearning to erase the shadow of her father's disappointments, but now it dawned on her that embracing those shadows might be the key to progress. The moment hung in the air, taut with potential. What if I fail? She echoed internally, acknowledging the silent conversation with herself. But somewhere between doubt and determination, a flicker of clarity ignited. She straightened her back, conscious of her posture, grounding herself in the gravity of the moment. I am prepared for that possibility, Claire, she finally said. But it won't stop me from trying. Every entrepreneur I've spoken with has faced setbacks. It's part of the journey. I can't promise that everything will work perfectly, but I can promise that we will learn. I will innovate if we find something effective. This isn't just my vision anymore, it's ours, and we'll navigate the failures together. Jamie felt a shift beneath the surface of uncertainty. It was the stirrings of trust. Some council members were jotting down notes, which she interpreted as a faint flicker of engagement. She took another breath, pressing forward with her newfound momentum. I believe in the resilience of our community. I've seen it. We've all had to rise from challenge after challenge. But if we're going to move forward, we have to face the potential for failure head-on. The room was still charged with tension, but Jamie could sense that something was changing within it. She focused on Paul again, whose earlier skepticism had not completely dissipated. I understand you'll want metrics, Paul. I'll outline specific indicator goals and metrics to measure impact, and regularly report back on progress. But remember that those numbers 1T capture the whole journey. The stories and growth experienced are just as vital as the data we compile. With a nod, Paul leaned slightly forward, intrigued. She couldn't afford to miss this moment. Jamie spoke passionately about how mentorships could create ripple effects in the community. Their stories would inspire others, and some of those students could become tomorrow's leaders or innovators. As the discussion progressed, she observed the council responding not just to her words, but to her conviction. Claire's initial resistance softened slightly, implying that perhaps she saw merit in Jamie's tenacity after all. A truce, if only temporary. Yet, a quiet doubt persisted. What if they still chose to reject her vision? How could she counter future adversity not just from the council but from her own self-doubt? Jamie stirred through these complexities, noting how easily she could retreat into fears of inadequacy. The danger loomed a slippery slope of despair if things did not materialize as she hoped. Still, light flickered through the cracks of uncertainty. Jamie could see a few council members nodding subtly, and with that, she felt emboldened to propose an ambitious timeline. Let us consider launching the pilot program in just 6 months. It'll be an iterative learning process. We'll adapt on the go, pulling in feedback from entrepreneurs and students alike. Every month, we'll review our progress as a team. The atmosphere shifted palpably, engagement replaced skepticism. There was energy in the room, a shared curiosity about what their combined efforts could yield. They were not merely hearing her but contemplating action. As the meeting wound down, Jamie realized she had taken an important step not just for the program, but for herself. She was learning to embrace the unpredictable tides of leadership, deeper than mere strings of affirmation. This was her crucible, shaping her as much as it shaped the initiative. But as some council members began to leave, she also experienced a sinking realization: clarity often came hand in hand with loneliness. What if she had only attracted interest without true commitment? One question lingered among the hopeful murmurs: was she prepared to face the full weight of this venture alone? Tomorrow, she would approach those influential leaders she envisioned connecting with the program. But that task loomed as another barrier. Would she find a support system, or was this her journey alone? The moment of truth awaited, and amidst the sparks of potential, doubt flickered insistently. It was time to confront the fear that had been brewing just below her consciousness all along, the fear that perhaps success wouldn't validate her, but failure deeply defined her. Jamie awoke the following morning with the weight of the previous day pressing down heavily on her shoulders. Her alarm beeped incessantly, a shrill reminder of the responsibilities awaiting her. As she sat on the edge of her bed, head in hands, she couldn't shake the nagging doubts that swirled within her. The council had shown interest, but that interest was fragile, teetering on the brink of skepticism. Today was about more than just presenting herself. It was about casting a net of connections that could anchor her vision in the midst of uncertainty. She couldn't afford to retreat into familiar patterns of fear. Yet, the thought of reaching out to established leaders sent a tremor down her spine. What if they didn't see her worth? What if they dismissed her as just another ambitious woman trying to rise from the ashes of her father's legacy? That sting lingered, despite the newfound resolve blooming within her. She dressed carefully, choosing her outfit with intention. A tailored blazer over a simple blouse, an armor of professionalism that reflected her seriousness. It wasn't just about presenting her ideas but embodying them. Arriving at the office, she breathed deeply, savoring the familiar scent of fresh coffee mixed with the faint notes of paper and ink. But her mind was racing ahead. How could she convey her passion? How could she invoke enthusiasm in these leaders without making herself vulnerable? The conference room's glass walls felt like a prison, trapping her with her thoughts. She fidgeted with her notebook, doodling diagrams of her proposed mentorship program. Each line she scribbled mirrored the complexity of her emotions, hope and doubt tangled like the intricate threads of a tapestry. Pacing slightly, she muttered her pitch to an empty room, watching her reflection in the glass. "We're not just building skills, we're building futures," she asserted, her voice growing steadier with each repetition. The words echoed back not as a simple mantra, but as a rallying cry she hoped could resonate in the ears of others. Finally, when the clock struck 10, she gathered her materials. The conversations she envisioned with the influential figures weren't just strategic moves, they demanded authenticity. She was not just selling an idea but inviting them into a shared journey. Walking into the meeting room was like stepping on stage. Each leader sat there, faces blending a mosaic of disinterest mixed with curiosity. Jamie could almost feel the invisible scales tipping between skepticism and intrigue. As she began her presentation, she fought to maintain eye contact, letting her passion visibly ripple through her words. She discussed the iterative approach, the need for growth through feedback, and how collaboration could redefine opportunities. Paul was there, arms crossed and eyebrow raised, still the holdout from their last meeting. But as she spoke, she noticed a subtle shift. He leaned forward, his posture shifting from rigid skepticism to something softer. "Let us make it happen, Jamie," he said, reminiscent of the way he engaged last night, and with that, doubt began to retreat from her mind. Perhaps this journey wouldn't be one of loneliness after all. The meeting concluded, but as she stepped out, Jamie realized her resolve had transformed. She hadn't just projected her vision, she'd woven pieces of herself into the fabric of her plans. The fear of failure now felt like an ally guiding her, not an impediment holding her back. But lingering questions remained. What if that trust wasn't solidified? What if the initial excitement didn't translate into long-lasting commitment? With newfound momentum, she navigated through the bustling office. Yet, amidst the chaos, shadows lurked, menacing reminders of her father's failures. Were they not whispers of warning, but lessons? Each step closer to bridging relationships seemed to beckon reassurance, yet the deeper fear was yet unaddressed. Jamie committed herself to focus on the urgency of the task ahead. Next, she needed to summon the courage to approach unexpected allies, leaders who could mentor her but might also expect her to uphold certain standards reflective of her father's reputation. The air was thick with the possibility of change, but as she closed the door behind her, that question loomed ever larger. Would she be able to carve her own identity, or would she forever remain the shadow of her father? Time was ticking, and the answers beckoned just down the hall. The shadows seemed to stretch longer along the hallways as Jamie made her way toward her office, her heart racing against the ticking clock. The meeting had ignited a spark, but the flame of uncertainty still flickered in the back of her mind. What if she stumbled in her next steps? What if those mentors she longed for didn't live up to expectations, or worse? What if they did, but not in a way that aligned with her vision? Every step felt duplicitous, as if the building itself was both a sanctuary of opportunity and a maze of trepidation. She found herself pausing in front of the glass partitions of her office, each surface a barrier, reflecting her internal conflict. The sight of her reflection, poised, yet uncertain, mocked her resolve. She released a slow breath, contemplating the faces she needed to approach, connections that could either accelerate her progress or bury her deeper in legacy-defining shadows. "Find your voice," she whispered to herself, a mantra that had framed her thoughts. But voices could be drowned out, they could be misinterpreted. Today, she needed to break through the cacophony of expectations and carve out space for her own narrative. Sitting behind her desk, she pulled out a list of potential allies, names scribbled hurriedly, each one a milestone in her journey toward independence. There were leaders whose work inspired her, individuals who had championed innovation and social change, yet their successes cast long shadows over her hesitations. Why would they want to engage with her? In a world of established credibility, she wrestled with being an inherited player in forceful arenas. With her phone poised for action, Jamie visualized each conversation. The first pick was Miriam, a respected mentor whose voice ebbed between calming authority and relentless ambition. Jamie had watched her navigate adversity with grace. Dialing the number, she could feel her pulse quicken. Disabled by expectation or empowered by ambition? "Hey Miriam, it's Jamie," she greeted, trying to keep her voice steady. "Jamie." What a lovely surprise. Miriam responded, her warmth washing over any apprehensions Jamie harbored. I've been thinking about our discussions on mentorship. I want to create a program that has real impact, and I believe your experience could help guide me. You've always had that spark. What are the parameters you're considering? Miriam's probing question felt like a turn at the crossroads. The discussion transitioned fluidly, Jamie presenting her thoughts, exploring ways to empower voices that often went unheard. She recognized an eagerness in herself, a shift from apprehension to exploration. Ideas danced between them, weaving together a collaborative vision as Miriam navigated Jamie through feedback loops that would help refine her proposal. Yet, as the conversation flowed, Jamie felt a rising tide of responsibility. Would this newfound ally expect her to uphold a standard? The residual pressure of familial expectations resurfaced, a familiar gnawing sensation that gnawed at her self-belief. Following the call, she felt exhilarated but slightly unmoored. The collaboration had felt genuine, but could she trust it to sustain itself? Engaging with someone of Miriam's stature often came with unspoken strings. Could she stand her ground amidst fierce influences? As she resumed her tasks, these questions lingered like an itch not yet resolvable, but pressing. There was a growing realization that every connection made would require her to fiercely navigate the terrain of her father's legacy and chart her own path. Today was one step, yet tomorrow sought deeper engagement. Time slipped away while she reimagined her meeting with Paul. Perhaps now was the moment to address not just her ideas, but the latent expectations tethered to her ancestry. The thought was unnerving, a potent mix of rebellion and courage stirring within her. She had to plan her approach, ready to confront those fears head-on. With her vision clarified, Jamie gathered her notes for the next phase, acutely aware of the weight they carried. The moment had arrived. Facing Paul would mean embracing her father's history while asserting her identity. Would the outcome propel her forward or send her spiraling backward into silence? As she stepped into the urgency of the office's rhythm, Jamie could feel the next chapter of her journey dawning. But hidden within that promise of growth lay the inevitable confrontation she knew awaited. Boldness was calling. Would she answer? As Jamie entered the conference room to meet Paul, a renewed air of determination surrounded her. No longer the shadow of her father's legacy, she had embraced her identity as a conduit of hope and innovation. It was time to own her narrative and transform inherited expectations into a vivid tapestry of her own making. "Thank you for meeting with me, Paul," she said, her voice steady as she took a seat across from him. The room felt charged with unspoken tension. It was more than just a conversation, it was an intersection of futures, his and hers. "Jamie," he acknowledged, his demeanor neutral but curious. "What brings you back?" "I appreciate your insights from our last meeting," she began, using the momentum from her earlier encounters. "I wanted to dive deeper into the collaboration aspects I mentioned regarding the mentorship program." Paul leaned back, crossing his arms. "It's a noble cause. However, you know the community is skeptical, especially after your father's history. What makes you think you can succeed where he did not?" The question hung heavy in the air, but instead of crumbling under its weight, Jamie felt her resolve deepen. "Because I stand here today not as a daughter burdened by the past, but as Jamie, an individual who understands the value of adaptability and innovation." She detailed her vision, the mentorship program rooted not just in commerce but in fostering talent, innovation, and resilience among the community's youth. Jamie spoke passionately about accountability, a distinct shift from her father's lofty ideals. "We will set clear, measurable objectives to ensure progress is not just aspirational, but tangible," she asserted. "This isn't just about restoring what was lost, it's about reclaiming our community's potential, learning from past failures my father's included, and forging a path that celebrates growth through collaboration." Paul's brow furrowed as he listened intently, the skepticism slowly replaced by intrigue. But a challenge still lingered. "You'll face resistance, you know that. The community won't easily shift perceptions. Are you prepared for that?" "I welcome it," Jamie replied, her heart racing with exhilaration. "Because every obstacle is an opportunity for dialogue, for education. I am ready to showcase the power of a unified vision." And I'll face the community head-on, actively engaging with them to inspire genuine investment in our youth. The shift in Paul's expression was subtle but evident. Jamie could see the opening, the crack in the armor of his skepticism. How do you plan on garnering support? He questioned further, curiosity piqued. I've been reaching out to various local leaders and businesses who share a common interest in community upliftment, she explained, her excitement bubbling forth. I want to create workshops, hands-on experiences, and partnerships that build connections between the youths and established professionals. This is about cultivating community leaders who can change perceptions through direct engagement. Paul nodded thoughtfully, the atmosphere shifting as Jamie's conviction unraveled the chains of doubt. Very well, you seem adamant, he finally said. Let us table this for discussion with the rest of the council, but he hesitated, no one can do this alone. Surround yourself with a team that can bring this to fruition, people who are equally committed. The comment struck at the core of her journey, and a realization dawned upon her. This wasn't simply about facing external challenges but enlisting a supportive network that could help sustain her vision. With renewed clarity, she seized the moment. I understand, Paul. I'm already in conversation with leaders like Miriam. I will assemble a diverse council to launch this initiative, one that relies on feedback and progress, and not just a monolithic perspective. Together, we'll craft a narrative of collaboration. Paul's eyes softened as he considered her words, his gaze shifting toward the possibilities. Acceptance hung in the air, a promise hinted at, waiting for action. Jamie felt the dawning sensation of accomplishment, her heart swelling with the confidence she had cultivated over the past weeks. Let us recommit to this vision, he finally suggested, extending a hand. Feeling the warmth of affirmation, Jamie grasped his hand firmly. This is just the beginning, she replied, the thrill of potential alight within her. As she left the meeting, a torrent of emotions surged through her. She'd taken a monumental step into establishing her professional identity, one not tethered to the weight of her father's past but built upon her experiences and her aspirations. Jamie had conquered her fears, embraced vulnerability, and found her voice, bringing her father's vision into the contemporary frame of urgency and purpose. In the week that followed, Jamie moved forward, solidifying alliances with local entrepreneurs and educators. The pilot mentorship program began to crystallize as partnerships formed and plans materialized. Yet beyond the initiatives, Jamie enjoyed personal fulfillment, learning the art of negotiation and persuasion, developing a robust network, and inspiring the youth she once feared addressing. Proud of her own evolution, she recognized the rich layers of strength and resilience that defined her. Finally, the official launch of the mentorship program unfolded with palpable anticipation. During the presentation to the community, Jamie stood among friends, allies, and supporters, sharing her father's inspiring legacy intertwined with her own aspirations. The stories exchanged that day soothed the wounds of the past and ignited excitement for the future. As applause resonated throughout the hall, Jamie felt validated, no longer lost in the fog of distrust, but standing in a space where she had successfully claimed her story. She conquered the challenge of redefinition, emerging as the architect of her future. Flashing a smile, Jamie recognized that she had not only achieved her goal of launching the program but had also founded her identity in the process, a confident, innovative leader ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that fuel determination and growth. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep the momentum going. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jamie's journey. Let's celebrate this triumph together. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and feel empowered to create their own path. Don't wait even one more second to share.